Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked.
So let's say that it's 1942. You own a massive corporation, such as Exxon, centered around the production of what the US government considers strategic materials. War support is high, and the American people are united against the Axis evils. So what do? Sell secrets to the Germans? Hell yeah! And this is actually true, by the way. The US government went to war with corporations several times. For example, the Justice Department brought a civil suit against Exxon for delaying the development of high-quality synthetic rubber because of an agreement with German companies. When you think of World War II, your mind most likely pictures people shooting at each other. But the events from 1939 to 1945 actually led to major developments related to globalization as well. So how exactly did the largest war in history bring people together and lead to globalization? Don't wars push people apart? Well, the short answer is yeah. But the development of new technologies throughout World War II and new connections formed between Allied nations created the opportunities for globalization to occur. And stealing Nazi Wunderwaffe, or wonder weapons, really helped as well. But to understand all of that, we need to go back. The Lend-Lease Act, passed on March 14, 1941, after an aid request from the British President Winston Churchill, gave the United States a legal way of lending or leasing war supplies to any nation deemed vital to the defense of the United States. In total, about $719 billion worth of equipment was sent as aid to Allied states by the time of the Act's expiration in 1945. This material was exchanged for no costs, with the rule to be used until returned or destroyed. Goods ordered by the British government specifically after the bill expired were given at extremely discounted prices, which the British government still had to use loans to pay due to the damages incurred by the Axis powers. The federal loans taken out by the British government were only fully repaid to the United States in 2006. These acts of kindness from the United States government, even though some might call the U.S. Lend-Lease program selfish, enticed Western European countries to enter collective trade agreements. The first assembly consisted of 40 nations meeting at the Bretton Woods Conference in New Hampshire on July 1st to July 22nd, 1944, which led to the creation of the International Monetary Fund, which oversaw the globalizing world's monetary and exchange rate systems. This meeting also established the World Bank, which was later responsible for using funds from the Marshall Plan to rebuild the Western world.
We have given much aid to the impoverished peoples of Europe.
So what was the Marshall Plan? The Marshall Plan, formerly known as the Economic Recovery Act of 1948, was a bill signed by President Truman to provide economic assistance to restore the economic infrastructure of post-war Europe. After the end of World War II, Europe was even more of a mess than it is today. The war had torn apart everything, and refugees faced famine, devastated economies, and the loss of 35 million plus young men. To help relieve exhausted European governments, the United States sent around $13.3 billion, or about $173 billion in today's monetary standards, worth of economic recovery programs to both Allied and Axis states. However, Allied governments received a much larger worth of these, and out of all the Allied countries receiving aid, the most industrialized received the most. The Soviet Union refused to accept any sort of aid from the Marshall Plan and blocked any aid from reaching the Eastern Bloc. Overall, the United Kingdom received the largest amount of aid, with 26% of the Marshall Program assets being sent to them. Asian states impacted by the war received aid as well, just not from the Marshall Program. Now back to those Wunderwaffe I mentioned earlier. World War II led to huge technological changes since the Allied and Axis powers were always trying to gain the advantage. Out of all the planned wonder weapons, the German military typically did not manage to produce anything but a prototype, with the exception of a few. Among the successful produced wonder weapons were the V-2 rocket, the very first guided explosive known as the Fritz X, and the jet engine. So remember, since the Germans invented the jet engine, every time you take a flight, you are basically saying Hail Hitler. Okay, not really, but anyway. At the end of World War II, the United States launched Operation Paperclip, which was an American intelligence program where about 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians were given a choice: build weapons for the Western powers and make up for their crimes against humanity or face trial. You can imagine that this was an easy choice for most of these technicians. Before you say, hey, the USA is evil for doing this, well, the Soviet Union launched a very similar program called Operation Osavikan, or something like that, where the Soviet Union sent more than 6,000 people from former Nazi Germany to strategic Russian areas to enhance lacking Soviet military technologies. So while the USA might be evil for allowing Nazi scientists to go free in exchange for their services, the Soviet Union did it too. Don't hate the player, hate the game. Now, some of these newly acquired German technologies, the jet engine being the biggest game changer, created globalization opportunities. Jet engines, even the early German prototypes, were much faster than basic propeller planes, and so aerial transportation was entering a new age. Early computers, which had been in development for years before World War II had started, saw a rapid increase in their development during the war due to war-related demands. The development of computers eventually leads to the creation of things like electronic currencies, online businesses such as Amazon, and more, making, at least in my opinion, the jet aircraft and computers the most important pieces of technology related to globalization that were developed during World War II. So this led to the start of the Free Trade Revolution. See, before World War II, many nations were stuck in the Great Depression. The Germans were hit especially hard by this since they were sucked dry of many resources as punishment for losing World War I, which prompted Adolf Hitler to take power, which basically means the Allied powers created Adolf Hitler, but who's keeping track anyway? See, war fuels an economy. When war broke out, national economies exploded with activity as new jobs in both industrial and military positions opened. The governments began spending at higher rates to produce needed resources and equipment, giving Axis and Allied forces considerable economic benefits. But these benefits really only work if you are winning the war. Eventually, you run out of people to throw at your enemy, and so you have to take them from industrial positions, which puts more strain on the entire war machine, which is precisely what happened in Nazi Germany. The United States never suffered from this issue because, well, we're kind of better, and because the war happened so far away from the American mainland, while the British, French, and Soviet Union were stuck in the middle, which meant that the United States received wartime benefits without receiving the negative effects those other countries did, putting the American economy far above competing war-torn countries. With the war over and America now the strongest industrial power on the planet, the American people, who had just been rationing for around 4 years, decided to start throwing money at stuff, and the USA entered an age of consumerism, which seriously influenced our current culture of hyperspending. More babies were also born in 1946, which, if for some reason you don't know, is the year after World War II, than any other year, because American men were returning home, and you can figure out the rest. With all these new children, Americans spent lots of money on their family, and with all this industry now, and people to work it, it's no surprise that international trade following the 2 decades after World War II expanded at the most rapid pace of the 20th century, and was named the Free Trade Revolution. In fact, from 1948 to 1968, the total volume of merchandise exports grew a full 290% from non-communist states, as European states managed to rebuild their own industry. And using the Bretton Woods system, which was erected during the Bretton Woods conference I talked about earlier, monetary conversions and international trade was a breeze. So with all that in mind, it's easy to see why globalization progressed the way it did following World War II. From new industrial facilities to new air and naval technologies to non-aggression pacts and alliances, World War II left a considerable impact on the world that has influenced much of our modern history. So next time you plan on starting a world war, be careful because it may define the next 100 years of the world.